Welcome, folks. I know you were probably expecting a very long intro, and you know something? Let's let's just go. I'm always preparing. Just go, just go. We're gonna do that tonight. And you might say that I'm transforming the stream. No, all right, fair enough. Real quick, going to catch up with some folks in chat just to make sure everyone knows that I know you're there. I see Bjorn, Jim Largo. I see Bill Wifta, Gojatron, Zazel, who also gave us a super sticker. Thank you so much, sir. And he says, also, I've got better things to do tonight than die. Like watch this live stream with these two legends. Oh, you're the legend, sir. I also like Gojatron where he says, one shall stand, one shall fall, two shall chat. 100%. This stream will light our darkest hour. You guys are really killing it here. Good stuff. Good stuff. Toy connection superior, Ken's bladder inferior. I dig it. These are all good references. And I see Ben Stutley and Anonymous Dude 123, Jason Garcia, Johnny Sorensen, Ted Millich, Treasures for Trigger. Welcome. I think this might be the first time you're in my chat. Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And Will McLaughlin says, when all hell's breaking loose, you'll be riding in the eye of the storm. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, but without further ado, tonight we're talking about Transformers and collecting them in this century, which I've never done, with the exception of a couple core classes that Gojatron sent me, and I've went on to buy many more from that version of the line. And the more that I think about it, and the more that I talk about it, and now that Action Force Series 1 is here, I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe I can start collecting these. And basically, it's been a several week process of help. So this is a very selfish interview for me, but I want to bring on one of the most well informed and amazing YouTube creators I know that collect Transformers, and that is Ken from Toy Kennections. Welcome to the show, sir.
Transform and roll out right into toy grinds. How you feeling today?
Oh man, I'm feeling pretty bad after that pun, but that's okay. I've done worse already, and we're only almost 3 minutes in. And I wanted to wait until you came on the screen to bring this up. We've known each other pretty much since my toy collecting began, as well as my content creation for toys began, and when your content began. But you've been collecting toys since the turn of the century, basically, right? A little longer.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped collecting toys. Like, I basically stopped collecting Power Rangers. Just with me as a teenager, spending my parents' money. Probably was 16, maybe I was 17. That takes me to 1999. A little bit of a break. I went into like rock CDs for a little while. I'm not really sure why. And then by 2002, Christmas time, I was back into toys and trying to spend college money trying to collect is a bit of a challenge even back then when things were cheaper.
Yeah, really. So you took a relatively short break compared to many people in our age. Normally, you hear about 5 year gap, 10 year gap, in my case, 30 year gap. You took about 3, 4 years off. It sounds like.
That's about it.
Yeah. And so, and do you have a lot of your childhood toys, from what I understand?
Some like I mean, my Generation One Metroplex, I just ganked it off of my aunt from 1987. She bought one. She was living with us. Next thing you know, it's in my collection. My childhood Power Master Optimus Prime that I got on a birthday, that's sitting in my collection right now. Just trying to think of a few. Um, some of them are still complete, which is something of a surprise miracle. Not really sure what to say there.
But there's a lot of like little parts to a lot of these toys, and you mentioned '87 Metroplex. That was one of the last Transformers that I got. I had chicken pox at the time. I got it very late. I was 10 years old, and
Yeah.
I had either it was birthday money or I'd gotten on the honor roll or something. I had $50, and my folks were like, "Hey, we're going out to down this area of town where the Toys R Us is. Like, do you want anything?" And I said, "Yeah, here's my $50. Get me Metroplex." And they said, "But that's just one toy." I'm like, "I know, but I really want him." Like, "You're sure? You don't want a couple little things?" Like, "No, I want the Metroplex." So they came back with Metroplex, and um, I had a blast. It was one of my favorite Transformers, to say the least. It was just cool. Had a lot of cool stuff to it and everything else, and just one of the coolest toys around. And as the background would insinuate, I love the Transformers movie. I don't have the relationship with it most people do. I loved it from start to end. Sure, I was sad about people dying, stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it. I enjoyed the fact that it was taken very seriously. But I was a mark for Transformers from the very beginning. Like I saw the cartoon, fell in love, watched it every single day. Every chance I could get my hands on it, I'd rent the VHSs when they came out. Movie came out, saw it in the theater, and just really was a huge part of my childhood. So for a lot of people that watch, they are probably like, if you like Transformers that much, why are you just now getting into it? It's because it's for me, it's been a bottleneck getting back into toy collecting. You have to pick your battles because for me, it's like, do I buy big chunks of lines or do I buy a bunch of stuff from different lines to try to get all the way through? And with the way that modern toys in particular are coming out, that's it's not feasible to do it that way. So you kind of have to pick your spots. But now seems like a good time for me. And it's also a good time to bring up a super chat from Jim Largo, who says
Jim,
toy
hi.
collectors never actually stop collecting. I can't even read it. When they stop collecting, they just take a time out now and again. Fair enough. Yeah, like for me, my timeouts last about 18 seconds these days. I can't speak for you, but I'm sure that's the case. And Treasures for Trigger, the soundtrack, absolutely. I own it on cassette, several versions on CD, multiple pressings of the vinyl. It is probably my favorite movie of all time, if not the one I consider the best of all time. So I would presume that on some level your Transformers experience was similar up until the point where I stopped collecting toys in the 90s. You were collecting all the way through. I know you're a Beast Wars fan. Um, you've had all those experiences. You never really stopped. What fuels you to continue collecting them? Because you have so many. What
I got a
makes you
couple.
keep going? Yeah,
You know, here's the thing, right? Like, I've okay. Hope my wife's not watching this stream because when I got my own place in my mid-20s, I had a bedroom and a den. Well, you can pretty much guess what went into the den. Pretty much just my whole collection.
right.
We moved to this townhouse in 2015, and I'm telling myself, I'm going to get out of collecting. We just had a newborn. I'm not going to collect. So I don't establish a proper man cave. I just put them up in the walls of the eating area of our home, and that's it. And then one day I was very ill. I won't talk too much about it, but after a hospital visit, I was staring at the ceiling going, you know what? I'm not going to stop with toys. I'm going to do toy shows. I'm going to sell at toy shows. I'm going to buy at toy shows. I'm going to keep collecting, and I'm going to buy everything I like under the sun. That was 6 or 7 years ago. And my collecting, which was petering off, suddenly went like this. And it's been doing that ever since. And if I could do like my friends at Cherry Bomb Toys do and have like an offsite, well, actually I shouldn't say offsite because they have one in their store, but like a museum, like a man cave everybody could access. I wish I could do that, and something that wouldn't just drain me financially. I
Right.
can't do that, so I'm trying to build something of a library of information for my toys, and that's when the YouTube channel first it started as Facebook groups, but I realized Facebook groups is a lot of like interactions of like, here's a picture, move on, right? If I wanted to get into the deep dives and the histories, I wanted to create a catalog for that, if one day I can't do this anymore, this catalog lasts for generations after, ideally. And collectors like yourself who want to jump back in and want to have a look at the history of G1 and say, oh, Ken Poe's made a 24-minute video. Great. So that's why you notice a lot of my videos are not the single figure reviews, that show this joint goes here, this joint goes there. It's a deep dive into something that I think other people may want to know. So that's what fuels me, is the ability to kind of spread the information while learning stuff myself. And I always say on the channel, when I learn, you learn. And if you notice, my camera is a lot clearer right now because the Jims and the Jodies of the world and the Ryan Sweeneys of the world were like, if you get a Logitech camera, it would look really good. So this is the clearest I've ever been. So I learned something from you folks too. Anyway, I don't know if that
Hey,
answers the question.
and that's how it goes. Before we move forward, I definitely want to say happy birthday to Brendan Haley, who just turned 50 today.
Happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday, babe.
Brendan. One of my patrons actually. So happy birthday from us, from Ken and Jim, Brendan. One of the best people
Absolutely.
I've ever talked to,
Oh,
Brendan.
Brendan's just tremendous. I'm happy that he's here after 50 years and hopefully 50 more. Um, which sounds weird because it's lifespan. You could do it. I don't know how that translates to Australian. Currency exchange may vary, as will your mileage. Consult your doctor. Void where prohibited. Moving on. Um, so as I'm as I'm looking at getting into collecting, I've kind of decided with Transformers, I have no interest in the old stuff. No interest in vintage for a few very simple facts that I'm sure you hear all the time. One, they're not cartoon accurate. So they're brittle, they're expensive,
Yep,
parts get missing, there's
yep.
too many different versions of them. I don't want to take those chances. And if I'm spending the amount of money that a lot of them go for, it makes more sense to go with stuff that's accurate and that is readily available. So it's not as much of a slog. I'm also not looking for a complete set of anything. I'm more or less looking for those uh, basically most of the characters from the original series all the way through to its end, and I'll cherry pick through. I won't get everything. When I have that, I'll be happy and I'll just move on. But with that, the biggest problem we run into is scale. And we've talked about this before, where the Transformers brand, I said this the other day on the stream, the Transformers branding, I should say, is so confusing, right? Even with like Motu, you've got Origins, Masterverse, and the CGI line. Those are the
Yeah.
three lines. And then you might have offshoots like Mega Constructs. Today they announced like a little people set and stuff like that. But it's clear what it is. Everything scales with itself. It's consistent, and you could tell from the box what line it's from. It's not difficult. Then you get to Transformers. All the logos are the same. There's so much going on in the box, even with the vintage stuff to a certain degree. Um, but I don't know what a legacy is versus a Armada versus a freaking Siege and all this. And I'm coming to realize that a lot of this stuff, especially where the legacy comes in, is that they're reissuing some older stuff. And there's been so many reboots and so many stop starts, and the scales aren't consistent. So I think the first thing we should start with is for the modern Transformers collector, what is kind of your, shall we say, cliff notes in terms of
Okay.
collecting characters that scale well together in today's lines?
Okay. So very loaded question. So loaded answer coming back the other way. Okay. So not everyone's a big fan of them, right? But because of the hollow nature and the lightness, the fact that the likeness is good, but they're very light in construction because there's not a lot of plastic. But the War for Cybertron stuff, the cliff notes is this, right? There's a lot of modern Transformers, right? You mentioned Armada, which is post Beast Wars. Armada, Energon, Unicron. Those are their own continuities. Those are like the Motu CGI show,
Okay.
entirely separate. That's how those are. When you look at the characters, they don't look like your G1 characters. When you start getting into like when they first tried to reboot modern G1 in 2006, they came up with a line called Classics. And of course, they couldn't just call it Classics. In Japan, they had to call it Henkei. And after a year, they switched the branding of Classics to Generation, then Universe, then United, then Reveal the Shield. There were so many things, but they were all one scale. And we always called it the Classics scale, right? I wouldn't go that far back because those modern figures to me haven't aged that well. I'm just acknowledging it for the people in the chat. A lot of big fans here, like Gojatron might know, Treasures for Trigger might know. They went into the Combiner Wars and Titan's Return a few years ago, and those were gimmicky, right? Like I can't remember whether it was Titan's Return or Power of the Primes. Everybody was a headmaster. I was not into that modern line. The best modern line to jump into, if in terms of your jumping on point, start with the War for Cybertron trilogy. The reason that is because Transformers always has this sub branding and a sub branding. So the sub branding for Transformers is the War for Cybertron trilogy, and then for the 3 years, It was Siege in 2019, Earthrise in 2020, and Kingdom in 2021. So it kind of branches off into
Okay.
these sub tiers, right? I really hope I'm not confusing anybody here. I probably am.
No, that's the most succinct explanation of that line that I've ever
Yes.
heard. Now
Yes.
it makes sense. I'm forming a word picture in my head.
Absolutely. Right. So, and they tend to do these like things in trilogies, just like the Armada, Energon, and Cybertron was the Unicron trilogy. And that was a completely separate
Okay.
continuity, but they ran it over 3 years. And it was one continuous continuity. Now, because they tend to do it only in 3 years, the fourth year is Legacy, right? And Legacy, if you look at it, it just fits right in with all the War for Cybertron stuff. Like this Legacy Soundwave that you grabbed, it's basically the alt mode of the Siege Soundwave with the deco of the Netflix Earthrise type Soundwave. And that's another confusing thing is when, for whatever reason, Walmart got an exclusive Netflix line that was running in parallel to Earthrise, but I just treated it as Earthrise. It was very confusing. But if you've rolled with the punches long enough, you just keep rolling with them. All while that's going on, they rebranded their Studio series into Studio 86. Oh, now we're starting to spin, and it all makes sense in my head because I've been following the bouncing ball. But right now, I feel like I'm juggling this in front of you, and your eyes are kind of going like this. So, the War for Cybertron trilogy, Legacy, and Studio 86. That's all you need to know. Okay, end stream. See you later.
Well,
Good night, everyone.
right. And I think that what it's going to come down to for me, because that's the feedback I got from you early on. I got it from a few other folks, like Boba Hicks and Johnny and a few other people, all kind of said the same thing. So it's nice to know there's a consensus of hardcore Transformers collectors on that end. So it's going to come down to me deciding which character and which line to get from which works the best.
Yes.
And because I plan to display in robot mode 99% of the time, I don't really care if it has the alt mode from the War for Cybertron. It doesn't
Bam.
matter to me. And I might piece together a G1 sound wave and a couple of the tapes just for nostalgia to have them off to the side. He is my favorite Transformer, not counting Unicron. The reason I say Soundwave is because I had one. He was, I believe, my first Transformer, or at least my first big one. And there's a huge nostalgia for him, but that's as far as I would go with G1. And Soundwave's not that hard to get. Like, I just gotta find the right deal at a toy show or something, and
Or you
bring
can
them
get
home.
the recent Walmart reissue.
That's true. Um, that's true. I could. I would still need the tapes, but those aren't hard to come by either.
Yeah, but Buzzsaw comes with them, right? So
I think so. Yeah, that's
Buzzsaw
one.
comes with them.
But if I'm going that route, I'd want the whole gamut because I never had like the second wave of tapes. I never had a Rumble. I had a Frenzy, and I had a Laserbeak, and I had a Buzzsaw, and
Ravage.
I didn't have a Ravage. I have a Ravage now from the core class.
Oh yeah.
So you have a Studio Series
Mm-hmm.
core class. So core class speaks to the scale.
Yeah.
Studio Series speaks to the design, and this is from
Yeah.
Bumblebee. But it's hard to see him, but he looks really good. Let's pull him out.
So what you have there is that the regular Studio series would be like the more live action film stuff, and Studio
Right.
86, you probably already know, is your cartoon accurate
Animated.
from
Right.
86. But sometimes they just get it right. Like that one looks kind of G1-ish anyway. Sometimes they'll just do
Right.
it that way.
And because I already have a handful of these core class, I pick up the ones that I like. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
avoiding all the Beast Wars stuff, and but I Gojastron was the one that got me started. He was the guy. The first two were free. He got me Optimus Prime and Megatron, and then from there I realized there were more of these, and I said, well, I'm just gonna grab all of them that I like. So I've got a Shockwave, a Soundwave, and obviously this one and the Sky Warp.
Oh yeah,
Mm,
the core class Skywarp. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's a legacy. He's a legacy one, and it's like
But it's small core class, right? Like to scale with your
right.
Soundwave, you probably want the Earthrise 2-pack with Thundercracker if you can get that one. It was a bit hard to find for a while, but then they started turning up. Because that's the one I have in my modern collection is the Earthrise version.
Right.
Um,
And with these core class ones, scale for me is not nearly a big issue. I
Okay.
just like having small representations of the characters. It's just a fun thing because they're really
Yes.
inexpensive. But when it comes to the serious scaling, like for these larger figures, we're going to go in the direction that you're talking about. There's a lot of different options, and I'm seeing tons of activity in the chat.
Oh yeah.
You're saying Transformer take with greedy space in the collection display. They all do. Anything that's not a minifig takes up a ton of space. I don't care because whether you're talking about volume of figures or relative size, it goes nuts. I took all my Action Force off of the display stand, and I just stacked the boxes, and it still covers the whole damn table. It,
Gotta
it's
love
it,
the new Action Force. Oh god, it's so good.
oh, it's a
They
whole
look
thing.
better in person. Like you look at it in a photo. My first thought, oh yeah, they look good. I wonder if I want them. Then you get them in hand. It's so rewarding when you get them in hand. I can't put
Oh,
it. I think maybe it's the boot treads and the details on the vest that don't turn up in the photos as well, right? And you being an ex-military guy, you could probably tell me if the guns are any good, right? So
oh, they're good. They're good. Better than they have any right to be for the price that they're selling for, too. Hey, Radical Toys, good to see you. Nolan, good to see you. You're not late at all. And Coach says Walmart reissued 2
yeah,
Soundwave cassettes as well.
they
Okay,
did. They did.
good to know. Good to know. Bum, 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 bum. Anonymous dude 123 is correct. Absolutely, 100%. Soundwave is the best thing. And Jim Largo says you need a Grimlock, best dad bod transformer. Yeah, he's got a big bit to put on.
Studio 86 Grimlock is your best
Yep.
bet.
Yeah, and I really got into a lot of cool stuff with that line. I remember distinctly in '85, I got a Grimlock for Christmas. It was one of the only toys I got because the other thing I got that year was a stereo, my first stereo for my room, my first cassette tape and stuff. And that kind of starts the divergence because I'm like grabbing tapes, and I'm grabbing this, and I'm grabbing that. So even at before I was 10, it was already doing stuff. KFC upgrade kits,
Oh, the
like
Keith's fantasy.
furniture.
No,
Oh,
Keith's Fantasy Club upgrade kits. Um,
no. I thought
yeah,
he meant Kentucky
that's
Fried Chicken, like legit. Um,
there is a legit third party company called KFC. So yeah,
well, sure, sure.
and you need to go downstairs and play with your Switch. But yes, thank you for the hug. Ah, and
While
he
he's
kicked my
doing that,
and he kicked my webcam.
we need to thank Mr. Salzberg for the generous super chat.
Ooh,
Thank you,
yes, yes, thank
appreciate
you.
that. But as we look through, there's so many. Knowing that they more or less all scale with the lines we've talked about, there is a fairly I wouldn't say a wide range, but you have multiple options for every character, right? So depending upon the aesthetic you're going for and the build, you can go there. So I've already decided that my Star Stream is going to have to be the coronation one because he does have the crown in which you can take off, and I like that build of him.
Have you
But if
ordered that one yet? Have you ordered that one yet? Should be on BBTS. There's a Studio Series one with the coronation and the throne.
yes, I have seen that one. I haven't ordered it yet, but yeah, I've seen that one, and
Yeah,
that's probably the one I would go with. And even if it's just the cape and the crown, I'd be happy, so I could have the option to display with or without.
yeah.
Um, Megatron, is that you? Here's a hint, and
Crumbles
like the
into
whole thing
dust.
where, oh, it's so brutal. I love it. Um, but as someone who's been collecting for a long time, there's a lot of compare and contrast. So you can say like, well, it doesn't look like this, and look at that. But you did send in a picture of some of
Okay.
your
Yeah.
more rare vintage finds, which I have lots of. It sparked memories in me, so I'm like, I can't wait to bring this up. So I'm going to bring it up now.
Sure.
Um, but walk me through. I guess kind of clockwise, going starting from the top left and going around what we have here.
Clockwise and okay, so go clockwise. Okay, so I kind of I did a video series last year called the Toy Kennections Toy Collection Virtual Tour. It was a 6-part series. I was relatively new to YouTube, and there's a few things that I want to do differently. Like I'm going to do the tour this time in a vintage tour and then a modern tour, and it'll be the whole collection, not just Transformers. I talk a lot, mostly about GI Joe, and a little bit about Star Wars and other stuff. So I pulled these all up because some of them are in the garage. Oh, thank you, anonymous dude. Some of them are in the garage. Thank you, Goji. Thank you, Treasure, Johnny, everyone. some of them are in the garage, some of them are hiding behind other things, and I finally got them all together for one photo so I could kind of film the virtual tour. And it got me into thinking, like, you see the armored Valkyrie there from Takatoku Toys, and then
Mhm.
immediately left. That's not Optimus. Well, it is Optimus, but it's his precursor. It's the Diaclone Battle Convoy from the
Right.
pre-Transformers days. And the box, and the really small box next to it, is Diaclone Slag, or the Diaclone Triceratops. And I have always really had a fond respect for the Transformers that came before the Transformers. So whether it's the Macross version of Jetfire, or whether it's the Diaclone or Micro Change stuff, I just loved it, because to me that was the genesis, the true genesis of Transformers. And then all the other box up, like some of the Japanese figures there, like you'll see the Grand Maximus figure there that's next to Fortress Maximus. It was the brother, and it's technically the brother of. Sorry, my son's back in the room and he's kicking my webcam again. You understand I'm live, right, Brandon? And everyone's getting mad at you for bugging me. So you better go before you better not bug me on this. Anyway, he doesn't actually know. Sorry, he's a really good boy. He did his homework today very early. He did all his chores and everything, and he's only 7, so he's actually a great kid. But he kicked my webcam, therefore I got to make him feel a little. All right. So the Japanese Transformers there, like Grand Maximus over on the far side there next to Fort Max, is a figure that I wanted, but whenever it came up locally, it was so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally got another one locally, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to buy this in 2 payments. Told my friend I was going to do that. Same friend sold me the Fortress Maximus, and then some of the other stuff is some of the Japanese stuff, like Victory Saber. There, you'll probably recognize right next to Jetfire, next to the G1 Jetfire. Victory Saber is the one they're doing the HasLab out of.
Oh, okay.
So that was the recent Transformers HasLab one. That's the original Victory Saber. And above him is Great Shot, which is the repaint of 6 Shot, and the Dark Wings set. And Deathsaurus is the 1989 leader from the Japanese Victory series, which is above Fort Max. And I have a confession to make about all these toys. Some of you folks, Zazel, and Ryan, you all like to talk to me like I'm kind of a Transformer guy. My confession is that in my local circle of the friends I hang out with, I'm the dumb one in Transformers. I hang out with Transformers folks. Bye, Brandon. Sorry, I think my kid's pissed at me for blaming him. And when I hang out in my circle of friends here locally, they all know way more than me. They know the variants. They know even like little things like this missile is rounded versus this one has a flat head, and depending on the year of release, that's when the variant happened. The whole history of everything. Even the number below Prime's trailer and how it has to match the cap, they will get all the finite details, and I'm always asking them. I buy their scraps. This collection of Holy Grail represents stuff that the other people upgraded, because that Grand Max box and the figure inside wasn't as pristine as the one he wanted.
Yeah.
Believe, right? The Great Shot box, which is the repainted 6 Shot, it's just a little bit of fade on the box. So the other guy who had it, he sold me his reject, and I got that. The Dark Wings box, which is just above Victory Saber next to Great Shot, one of the side flaps is missing. So my friend Jeff, with his mountain of Holy Grails, and I got to go look at his collection, because his collection is, without exaggerating, 5 times better than mine. This is the level he collects, is that I am literally picking off his scraps.
I mean, you got to do what you can, and it's certainly something where, for someone who knows as much as you do, to quote, be the dumb one, unquote, speaks volumes to how deep these lines go, which is why when I decided to start collecting, I just said, okay, I need to talk to somebody. And so it was the right time, and certainly it's nice to have the resource. And there's no shame in collecting scraps, man.
And
None at all.
this is how I learn, and this is why I always tell collectors to stay humble, because you see a lot of flexing on Facebook. Like, I'll post something and someone will try to one up me with something, and I'll be like, I don't even want to get into this, because you have to hang out with people who know more than you. That's how you get better. It's like when I used to, the very, very brief time I trained Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I had to spar with people better than me. It was the only way I could get better. And with
Right.
Transformers, because these folks are just Transformer people. If they have a G.I. Joe question and I would consider my knowledge okay enough on G.I. Joe or He-Man or Star Wars, I'll answer them because I can help them with the peripheral stuff that they're not as into. But with the deep Transformer stuff, they help me. Same thing with my G.I. Joe friends. A lot of them know way more than I do, but I'll help them with Transformers, right? So if you hang out
Exactly.
and you're the dumbest one in each of your circles, you will collect the knowledge that will at least put you able to talk to everyone to some degree, and then you can help them because you'll have an eclectic selection, whereas they're hardcore in one thing specialized. That's my attitude towards collecting. Right,
Exactly.
keeps me humble.
And people kind of regard me as the superpowers guy in our circle, but really it's Bill from Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures. He knows more than I think anyone about that line, and has done all the research, and it's only by virtue of learning things from him and some others to really get me to where I feel like I have a knowledge base. I have that knowledge base and the experience, but it's only by virtue of that community sourcing. It's so important. And while we have this picture up still, seeing this, I remember distinctly in 1980. I want to say it would be 85, probably 85, 84 or 85. We were on our way to the video store and we saw this little tiny shop that's across the street from the video store. And I don't even remember why we went in there. It might have been that my mom had been tipped off to something, and maybe she knew more than I did. I don't remember the conversations that we had had, but I walk in there and it's Japanese stuff from wall to wall, tons of convoy stuff everywhere, and I saw the sound wave on the shelf, and the colors were a little bit different. And I said, "Well, this is a bootleg. This is fake." As a kid, that's the immediate reaction that you have because we didn't have the information at the time of how this all came to be. And you just didn't put two and two together to make Convoy. And I could have had that, could have had a Shockwave from Convoy, which I don't know his actual name. I mean, I'm 99% sure that they had the Valkyrie in there at that point, or something similar to it. And the prices were actually really good, from what I recall. I think that the reasonable price combined with the unfamiliarity, it just made me go, I no, ma, I don't want these. So I could have had original Japanese Transformers, at least one or two. We never went back to that store again, and we might have had I bit the bullet. And it's one of those wow, this just got away from me kind of situations for sure. And things that don't get away are Jim Largo super chats, and he says, um, "Were there any Transformers that came with human companions that were decent toys?" I think that's in the eye of the beholder. I never liked any of them myself, but what do you think, Ken?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a cop out answer or not, but most of the Diaclones came with drivers, right? But he's also saying decent toys, and the Diaclones are G1 brick type of figures, not very articulated. I mean, the some of the masterpieces will come with like an unarticulated figure that sits in the cab, like the Masterpiece Ultra Magnus came with some. The MP10 Optimus came with that. Slag, the Dinobot, came with Daniel, and but there's an unarticulated Daniel that's just meant to sit on his shoulder. So there is that. The Masterpiece Bumblebee came with an exosuit Spike. So there's a few there. That
Mhm.
would be the best one. The Masterpiece 21 Bumblebee that came with Spike. I'd talk myself into that one. Hope that answers your question, Jim Largo.
And they did do a core version of that, which I've been eyeing up, because
Yes, they did do a
mhm.
core Spike. Yeah.
And what's interesting to me of all of the core class figures that have come out, you know what the hardest one to get is at a decent price these days? It's Spike. Of all of them, it's Spike. Because if you didn't get him on the first round for whatever reason, he's like tripled in value for no apparent reason, and I think it's dumb. But here we are. I canceled some pre-orders because I was buying some other stuff, and I missed out on that guy. So now I'm like, do I really want to go back? Because again, he's not going to scale. So I'm looking at the core class Bumblebee with him in it to get Bumblebee because I don't have a Bumblebee, and to have the Spike because it scales, and it's just like I'm just I still can't believe it. I can't believe it.
It's
It's kind of
okay.
nuts.
The,
Um,
it's like anything, they'll re-release it. Like Ironhide and Ratchet were impossible to get from Earthrise, and a lot of people got their Amazon orders canceled because that was an Amazon exclusive. And it was kind of
mhm.
like a Wondar situation where a bunch of people ordered it and a bunch of people got it canceled. Luckily, I got mine, damaged box and all, and I didn't care. I was like, I got a damaged box when I don't care. And then now they're making Ironhide again in Legacy. I'm pretty sure they're making Prowl as well, but I know a lot of people were rejoicing over that. So you'll see Spike again, right? But there's a lot of things that they do, like the upcoming Cosmos figure was one per case. And when you look at that wave, he's the only figure everybody wants. So Hasbro's problems with distribution often extends to Transformers as well. Not always, but when it happens, you'll know.
Gotcha. So when it comes to acquiring these figures, obviously there's eBay for the stuff that's not on the shelves anymore. Certainly, we want to go into the different retail stores. Especially now is a good time to go into Walmart's because they're about to do a switchover. So there's a lot of stuff that's on clearance right now, things like that. Big bad for pre-orders by and large, but they do stock a lot of stuff. They've actually hung on to a lot of Transformers stock. Um, Other than eBay or the retail stores, what we've mentioned, are there any kind of tips or tricks that you would
Yes.
mention for
Yes.
Transformers?
Toy shows, toy shows, toy shows. Because when I go to the ones here in Vancouver, if I missed on something from 2020, like let's say I missed Earthrise Optimus, I wouldn't, but
Mhm.
let's just say I did. The odds of someone having picked that up on clearance as they were turning it over and then marking it back to the regular price, hopefully not much more than the regular price, but maybe like regular price plus tax, you will find that at the toy show, and it's like getting it again. And if you got to pay a small premium because the secondary market's gone up a little, it's going to happen here and there as well. But
Sure.
that's where the stuff from 2 3 years ago ends up a lot of the times is toy shows. And there are going to be a lot of people who collected during COVID and then went and purged their collections. I've seen that happen. And then some local toy show vendor buys the whole collection and then fills their table with it. So that's what I always say. Even if it takes you an hour to get to a toy show, call up the organizer and say, what kind of event is it? Like if it's 10, 15 tables, okay, maybe not. But if it's 50 to 100 tables, you might want to go because you'll find stuff, right?
Yeah,
I got a toy
and
show here in town, 225 tables. I think Ryan Laserpants is coming up in October to meet me up here because he's down in Seattle. 225 tables. The organizer is a comic guy. He can't tell a Transformer from a GoBot, but because he has 225 vendors here in Vancouver, um, there's going to be a lot of Transformers. In fact, there was at the June show. So, yeah.
yeah, and there's plenty of like toy stores here in the area. I have a nice wide array to choose from here in the Metroplex DFW. And we have a few shows for sure. The one that I'm at the most, of course, is Retro Palooza, bias, and that's a wide array of things from video games to toys, and there's always a little something. And the prices are always good. So I tend to lean into shows and conventions that I know that there's a reputation for high quality of vendor. I don't like going places and seeing all this cool stuff, and then stuff is double what it should be, even at current market value. Drives me up
That
the
does
wall.
happen. That's happened to me a few
Oh
times
yeah,
here where I go and I'm like, okay, there's no way. Like you grab that because it was one per case and you're doubling the price and it's still in stores, but it's hard to find. Like that could be a problem. And at that point you make the vendor an offer. You go, okay, look, I'll give you 25% more than current retail because it's the finder's fee premium and that's it. They might tell you to go off yourself, but at least you tried and you knew that they're the one not doing the moral thing. Right. So yeah.
Anonymous dude 123 says, "Can't tell a transformer from a GoBot. What a toy collector diss. I'm going to use that. I like that, Johnny. I'm going to use that. I mean, it's
Is
fair,
that
and
is that
it
anonymous
was.
dude's name? Is it John?
I don't know his first name. That's literally his
Okay.
handle. Anonymous dude
Oh,
123. I
okay.
don't know.
Okay. Sorry, I thought
I
you
think
said
it
his
is
name was
Johnny.
not there anyway. Okay,
Mm-mm.
cool. He's always in my comments as
Uh,
well, so I'd like to call him by his first name as well if I get the chance. I like to get to know our regulars. You know.
I'm with you, but when your handle is literally anonymous dude, I'm like, you know what? I'll respect that.
Fair
Um,
enough.
But if there ever comes like an anonymous dude XYZ, I'll be like, "Who are you?" There's only one anonymous dude, and he's 123. That's kind of my whole thing. So I also want to just call out that Masters Maniac Mexico is here. It's nice to see you, especially keeping up the Mexican and German representation in chat. Appreciate it. And I see a question from my good friend SFX Leon, um, who is an amazing collaborator, wonderful friend. He asks,
Oh yeah.
"Do you think Transformers or toys in general are going to keep rising in price? It seems like it with video games, no sign of slowing." I have an answer to both of this, but I'll let you take the floor.
Well, feel free to answer, but I recently did a video called "Collecting Transformers, Is It Still Worth It?" And I tackled this exact topic because rising prices, smaller figures, less plastic. You now have they're now selling a leader class figure, which is basically just a Voyager with accessories, like the Starscream that we are talking about earlier. That's a Voyager class figure, and in fact, it was even not even a Voyager class a number of years ago. It was probably just a basics class at the time. Or a deluxe class, I should say. So now the prices go up, figures get smaller. I hope it plateaus now, but I am kind of hoping to slowly stop collecting Transformers, find my stopping point, and be like, I want the money in the bank now. But once you've started something and you commit to like a certain number of characters or a certain amount that represented the television show, you keep going, and then you'll just know you hit that stopping point. And for me, it's not quite there yet. I gotta get
Right.
Legacy Manosaur because I really want it. So yes. Anyway,
Fair
you
enough.
wanted to answer this question too.
Yeah. So when it comes to the bubble that we're seeing, there was a huge spike from COVID because more people were getting into the hobby. So people saw
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity to make some money, and that's totally fair. That's what the market is like. With gaming, I think you're going to see some games come down in price because right now I was just talking to patrons the other night, and I showed them a pie not a pie chart but like a line graph of my video game collection's value over the last 3 years, and it's been going up, 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 and now it's starting to go down in very small increments. So I think we're starting to see the bubble start to not burst but deflate in retro video games. Some things are always going to be expensive, and I think the same would be true of toys depending upon the line. So I think the ultra rare stuff is only going to go up in price. I think you're going to see a plateau with most toys that are common to slightly uncommon. But as far as the overarching, perception of value that we currently see, it'll dip a little bit, I would say, in the next 2 years, and then you'll see a steady climb again after that, unless we find another bubble where people are getting into the hobby more. I think that's why in the last 2 years you saw such a big rise in price because more people just see that decline just a little. And we're loading. Okay, now I'm back. Yay. Okay, good. So
Were you
that's what I think
frozen? Were
ultimately.
you frozen or was I frozen?
Uh, we both were frozen for a second, and I think that's
Okay.
because of me. So my bad. Everything's okay now. It's all good now. It's fine. But
Yes.
ultimately, yes, I think that the bubble will deflate a little bit, and then we'll see a more steady climb. It won't be nearly as at the high rates we've been seeing. Um, but there's all of that to say, if there's something that you like, now is probably the time to buy it because we are seeing some things come down a little bit, a little bit. And for the record, anonymous dude did chime in. His name is Jordan.
Jordan.
We love your handle. Yeah,
Awesome.
nice
I
to meet
always
you,
love the
sir.
handle. Yeah, and he always
Yes.
contributes to the chat. So whenever those regulars who contribute to the chat always make us feel good as content creators, because I mean, as you know, when you're just starting a channel out, and I started 15, 16 months ago, if I did a premiere, I was lucky if there was one other person in the premiere with me. I wouldn't even go live for that reason, right?
Hmm.
If I did a video, I was glad if it got 30 views on it at the time. So when people come in and start commenting regularly, you know they're boosting the algorithm and helping to get your information out there. And all these people in the chat, wonderful people. So yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. And a great speaking of regulars, Brick something who is a recently minted regular has a great question. He asks, "I'm curious about how the Transformers collectors view the Super 7 Ultimates stuff. Is it embraced, given that it's pretty different than what's typical of the toys?"
What do you think?
Personally, I don't like it. That's all I gotta say.
The whole fallen leader Optimus Prime, and I don't know, it just Super 7 is a bit gimmicky. You either love it or you don't. Like they'll produce something really good
Right.
like the TMNT Ultimates, right?
Hmm.
And then they'll do something like they'll do their Sunbow GI Joe stuff, and then I'll be watching Geek Dad Life manipulate the backpack, and all of a sudden the backpack breaks. And if you know Jay, you know he's not a careless guy. And you're like, okay, something's not right here. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, love their TMNT stuff, right? A lot of people love their Thundercat stuff. So more power to Super 7 if they can get more business that way. I'm not really feeling the Ultimates, though. Right.
Yeah, and it's something where I think you hit it on the head when you said the Super Seven's kind of gimmicky, and you either love them or you hate them. If anyone wants to know what I think in general about Super Seven, go watch my Napalm Death Super Seven figures review, and you'll know exactly what I think about Super Seven.
Okay.
So
Fair
I'm
enough.
I'm not really a fan, and I think that they're exploitive. That's the short version, but it's a good video. It took me a long time to make. Give it a watch.
I'll have to check it out.
Um,
Yeah. I'm glad they're around as an option, right? But I'm also glad
sure,
there's other
sure.
options. Right.
Well, I also feel like if we're talking about that company in particular, as with many of the, shall we say, third party toys, I'm not talking about like, um, knockoffs or anything like that. I'm talking more so about actual licensed third parties that are not Hasbro and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not the only one. They price up really high, and I think that's a reflection of how much the license probably cost them. So it's like I understand it, but like those ultimates, the TMNT ultimates, they look amazing. They really do.
They're
But for the
good.
price that they're charging, no, I'm not paying
Yeah.
$50 for a turtle. It's just not happening. Especially when I can get two of them for the same price from Playmates with arguably the same levels of articulation and detail if you're into that aesthetic. Um, Playmates has its own kind of, uh, shall we say, mis- misgivings or shortcomings, if you will. That's probably a whole other stream. We could probably talk turtles for like 3 streams and never get through it all because just like with Transformers, the Ninja Turtles have heaps of different lines and reuses of molds and all kinds of stuff that make it very confusing to collect in its own right. And Gojatron says that he has a codependent love hate relationship with Super 7. And I can confirm that because I'll see something that's kind of cool and I'll send it to him and he goes, ugh. Like he likes the design, he likes the figure. But he's like, I don't want to give them more money. Not a direct quote, but certainly something else. And Brick Something says that as a resident of the Bay Area where Super 7 is based, it's also an issue of higher operational costs. They also have 2 retail stores, and one in San Francisco and one in San Diego, both big bucks. And I completely understand that. But it's like, I don't know if that's a why should I, as a collector, have to bear your expenses for running a brick and mortar store when I'm not patronizing your brick and mortar store? That's my thing. You should be taking care of your business. Your online business should not be a direct reflection of the other, in my personal opinion. And you see that sometimes with boutique toy shops, where if you go into the store, they have great prices, they'll negotiate, and everything's cool. But if they have a website, they're charging way higher, and they're also charging for shipping, which it's their business. Free market, do what you want. But I feel like there's some disingenuous vibes that come from that, even if I understand why you would do that. If you could make a little extra money for your trouble, it makes sense. But at least but at least there's a disparity, right? If I go into the store and I you form that relationship, and it's the same is true for vendors at cons and shows. The more you buy, the less you pay. That's true of any collectible that's out there. And so when we see that there's such a wide array. Any collecting, whether it's going to Leon's question or talking about Super 7 and our misgivings about that, it always comes down to research. Never take the first offer unless you have never seen that item before. Um, Always do your research, figure out what the actual value is on it, and then make an informed decision in a purchase that works for you, at whatever a reasonable price is. Um,
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, not to cap that so much, but it's certainly something that in this day and age, more than ever, we have the resources available to us, whether it be community members from afar or blogs, websites, YouTube channels. If you're not doing your research, you're throwing money out the window and you're burning cash for no good reason. And that goes to something as simple as just knowing when something's actually complete, knowing what parts come with something, things like that. So you need to at least find a review of the figure when it was new or a complete one from a vintage and make sure you know what the hell you're looking for. Um, would you say with Transformers, whether it's modern or vintage or what have you, um, what are the kinds of things, one of the, like, or maybe misconceptions or things to look for in general, especially on the secondhand market where you're not buying something sealed if it's like, say, loose? What are some of the most common problems that you can run across that maybe a novice collector wouldn't wouldn't know to check right off the bat?
Most common question I get, which I don't always know that I'm equipped to answer the question for, is when someone finds a vintage one and they know that there were those complete counterfeit ones from the mid 2000s, mid late 2000s, around 2007, they started showing up. They come to me and they say, "Hey Ken, is this Grimlock real? Is this Swoop real?" And it's really difficult to answer, especially on a photo. I can probably tell if I'm holding it in hand. But even the tells are not 100%, because I've hated answering it in Facebook in a public thing, because I've said before, the box looks way too mint. Like there
Right.
would be a little bit of fade even in the color for that to be legit. And then of course some other know-it-all will jump on you and say, well, my collection has a mint box like that. Are you calling me a fake? I'm like, no, I'm just saying odds are, you might be the 1 in 1,000. But of course, because you're the 1 in 1,000, you got to correct me. The other one is if you got it open already, um, if the chrome is pristine and the the joints are a bit loose, probably it's a knockoff. If you're holding it in hand, I think they use a lower, in fact, I'm almost sure they use a lower grade of ABS plastic. And you can kind of tell in hand, like when you're holding, something from Hasbro, one of the big companies, that quality of plastic looks better
Right.
than the knockoff. So I get that question a lot, and I'm not very equipped to answer. I will say though, for everyone out there, the knockoff, the counterfeit Transformer G1s did not come in international boxes. So I often get the question from a Canadian, and I say, "Well, your box is bilingual. It's got French on it. They didn't knock that one off, so you're good. You're safe, right?" What was the original question again?
Just common things to look for that the average person wouldn't know starting out when it comes to collecting.
Yeah. So that's for vintage. For modern, it really is. It's daunting, right? Don't be afraid with Transformers to ask the question. I want to get into it. Where do I start? Which Optimus? Which Megatron? Which Soundwave? Which Bumblebee? There is nothing wrong with that question. And if somebody tries to play know-it-all and mansplain it to you, they're probably reflecting on their own insecurities, because that's one thing in our collector space is that people tend
Yeah.
to be like, "Oh, you don't even know." Well, you can't know if you haven't followed the bouncing ball for the last, it's been 38 years. Transformers have been at mass retail, and even if it's even the years that they weren't released in the US, like 91 and 92, they were still released overseas. They still had toys in Japan, they still had toys in Europe. Some of those toys made it to Canada, so they were being mass released somewhere. And then from Generation 2, 1993 onwards, they haven't really stopped. And I said the same thing to Jody one time. Even when Generation 2 went defunct in 95, well, by 96, Beast Wars came out. So there was always a calendar year where there was a mass release, retail release somewhere. And that's just always been the case. So
Right.
if someone wants to jump in midway, where are they going to jump in? I was confused in 2002 when there was a lot. I didn't even know what a reissue was back then. So, yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like we're saying, do the research, figure it out, and even if it's just as simple as asking that question,
Mm-hmm. Have a
because there,
network of friends, right?
yes, yes, and it's something that even in my cursory research, trying to figure out, just getting a definitive explanation of that War for Cybertron year one, year two, year three. I've never seen it displayed in that way succinctly. Like, here's what this is. Maybe it's out there, but I haven't seen it anywhere. And that's part of why I'm selfishly having this subject as our first stream together on my channel, because I need this information, frankly.
And I will
Um,
qualify this with Siege. That's it's basically a line themed in battle damage and Cybertronian modes. And I know you don't mind the Cybertronian modes, but understand that if you get a Siege Starscream, you're getting the Cybertronian Tetrajet. You're not even getting the F-14 or 15 plane, and you see a lot of the battle damage. So you may want to start with Earthrise. But there's some Siege figures like Springer that are just really good that you might just like. So just
right.
throwing that out there.
And sometimes you see multiple versions of a character that were released within a year of each other, and you're just looking at them, and it really comes down to an aesthetic difference. Like there's right now 3 or 4 versions of RC that are retail available, and I'm like, which one do I want? It's probably going to be the Studio Series 86, but at the same time, there's like 2 or 3 other ones I've looked at that are pretty good looking, and I'm just not sure which
But
one
there's
I want.
but there's some confusion there because they took the Earthrise RC, they put the third year of War for Cybertron box on it and re-released it in Kingdom. So it's the same RC, but then they released it in Earthrise and then Kingdom. So they do that. They think they did the same thing with Blaster. They released him in Kingdom and then Legacy. And
Mm.
Galvatron, I think, is the same, but with a slightly different purple. But the difference in purple isn't that much, so it just happens,
Ay, ay, ay,
right? Because
ay.
they will take the same figure and put new packaging on it,
Right.
right? So
Uh, so there's an elephant in the room where Transformers are concerned, and that would be the unauthorized market, is what I like to call it. And there's, if you go to the Far East, there's plenty of Transformers for you, but they're not by that name. And there's so many different competing versions that I've seen. Sometimes it's the same thing going by like 9 or 10 different names. It's not. It's too dissimilar from what you see in electronics on Amazon with Chinese sellers, stuff like that. Um, what experience do you have with those lines, and are there any that you would say to steer clear of, or ones that are really good to get? Are there any standouts with that stuff?
so a lot of the third party stuff was made in the masterpiece scale, right? So if you're not into the masterpiece line, then the third party stuff, 90% of it won't be for you anyway. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe in the last few years, I think they've started doing add on sets for the War for Cybertron stuff.
Hmm.
And in the early years, they did the more retail release third party stuff. So I understand there's those caveats there. There's so many of them now. I don't mind those unauthorized releases because those unauthorized releases are true third party. They will take an actual figure and engineer it from scratch by themselves, entirely from
Hmm.
scratch, and then they'll release it and they'll call it like Red Leader rather than Optimus, or they'll call it Tyrant instead of Galvatron or something. But it's not like you're taking a Hasbro release and just changing the scale and reverse engineering it. They're doing their own engineering from the ground up. So the company you mentioned earlier, KFC, that's one that I like their stuff. I have a masterpiece scale Blaster, which wasn't called Blaster. They released him, they called him Transistor. Put him next to my masterpiece Soundwave. You cannot tell one is unlicensed. But collectors tend to respect those third party companies that do things from the ground up. It's the straight up knockoffs that collectors don't respect so much, but a lot of people will buy them because it's like reproduction Star Wars. They'll buy them because it fills a gap. And I have no issue with that whatsoever either. But there's more controversy around the one to one repro.
Well,
Um,
sure.
Less so than Star Wars. That market, there's a whole war with it. In Transformers, it tends to be 8 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 people, in fact, in Transformers I meet will say, just don't try to sell it as legit and dupe your fellow friend. And then there's 1 out of 10 who treats it like Star Wars. Whereas Star Wars is very divisive. It's like 50-50.
And
Right.
I think that comes from, this is a generalization, so folks brace yourselves. In my experience, people who are hardcore Transformers collectors are, for whatever reason, in general, they seem to be more rational and helpful than those diehard, super crazy Star Wars collectors that are looking at it as an investment. Because every collector space, you have folks are looking at it as a financial investment, but also maybe just like them as well. But they're kind of hanging on to the value aspect of it. Whether that's again they view it as some sort of faux social status, versus someone who's just collecting for the love of it. And I find that the ratio of collecting for the love versus the value, more of the love in the Transformers, where in Star Wars it's a much less disparate number. Um, and that's good because we need the help. You know, in Star Wars, there's just not as many moving parts, no pun intended, with it. So it's something where it's like, wow, wow, yeah. You know, because we were talking about vintage Star Wars. There's one. There's essentially one line that people go after, and sure, you've got the offshoots and stuff like that. With Transformers, from the very beginning, like the toy line itself, when we're talking about the, you know, Western releases, it was a mishmash of multiple toy lines that were then released as one toy line. So right from the get go, it's confusing. And then the further along we go, without any major gaps in production, you need to talk to somebody. And thank goodness that they're approachable for sure. And I've said it many times before, and I'll say it here again. The only unauthorized third party that I am really after would be the Unicron, and that's just because it's the only way I'm ever going to get one. But
Which
that's
Unicron specifically, though?
I've looked at a couple of them.
Oh, Jody mentioned a few when I streamed with him and
Right.
John and Treasures. Yes, yes, he did
Yeah,
mention a few.
and that's you know, I've looked at like the pumpkin one, and there's a variant of that that's out there. I forget the name of the company off the top of my head, but you know, even if you get it direct from them, you're still talking 350 $400 for that thing.
Hmm.
That's a hefty investment. Now,
Yeah.
when one considers two things, one, Unicron is my holy grail. Close to you know, in terms of Transformers, a close to scale, fully functional Unicron. That's so it's worth money to me to begin with.
Yes.
Two, the only other Unicron I've ever considered is the Armada one because he's attainable, but he doesn't scale at all. And it's not. And if I'm because again, if all I was collecting were these core class, that would be good enough for display and be fun and fine. But as I'm moving into this, it's like, well, I want something bigger, and it looks like they're going to keep making them in small batches, get it, and be happy. Um, Plus, the Armada Unicron, it's starting to go up in price just a little bit. Because this time last year, you could get a complete one in box for about 150, and now you're lucky to get it below 200. So it's not worth it. So if I'm already willing to spend that much, why not just double down and get the big gigantic guy? You know?
Have you looked at the Takara 25th anniversary one, which is the repaint of
Mm-mm.
Unicron of Armada? That's the one I have in my collection. That's the reason. That's the main reason I didn't go for the HasLab one. Is I felt I had my Unicron representation in my collection already, and it's the only Unicron I've ever had, and it's the only one I kind of ever expect to have. Now that I think about it, so
And that's the talk about 25th anniversary repaint.
25th anniversary Takara by Takara, or Takara as Treasures for Trigger says it because he says it properly. That's the one that I recommend, and it looks exactly like the Armada one, but it's more 1986 cartoon accurate, movie accurate.
Okay. I'll definitely
See
consider
what
that
that
one
one has
because
gone up to, right?
yeah, we'll check it out. An articulated chat with a super chat. Thank you so much. Says awesome conversation, gentlemen. No,
Hey,
you're
Chad,
awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that,
good
man.
to see you, Chad.
Definitely. Um, no worries, Bill. Take care. Glad that you were here. So we'd originally talked about the possibility of a 75-minute discussion with a hard out of like 90 minutes. So I don't want to take up too much time. Um, so I want to make sure that we're getting close to a wrap up. So immediately I want to just call it out. You know, Q&A floodgates are open for you guys. We'll answer as many questions as we can before Ken has to go. Um, but I do want to just right away say thank you so much for taking the time and having the patience to go through this stuff that, you know, for you at this point, it's almost common knowledge, but I always appreciate it when someone takes the time. So thank you. I appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me on the show and for all your answering of questions for things like technology, like this microphone is what I call a grindhead Jim special, right? Because that's who recommended it to me because I was looking at something else, and he's like, you might want to try this, and it's affordable, and you can upgrade again later, but this will take you a long way. Like you'll be a while before you want to upgrade this, and by a while it might be years, right? So
Right.
And for, like when I first started on YouTube, you'd been around for a long time, just through previous passions and previous outlets. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what's a copyright claim? How do I get my frame ratio right? So like you had patience with me when it came to the techie stuff, right?
Sure. But that's the give and take of a friendship, really, and that's what it boils down to. So it's always nice to have a valued friend as a
Mm-hmm.
resource for this sort of a thing. And Gojastron absolutely handled Bjorn's question properly, so we'll just leave it where it sits.
Ooh,
If you don't know
I,
what he's talking about, just trust me. Just don't do not engage. Uh, it's a channel meme, but I 2 weeks ago I was like, yeah, I think I'm in. I think I'm in, and it was during that discussion and I just said, "All right, I gotta try." And I was getting feedback from chat and from you and everywhere else, and um, I after this discussion, I feel really well informed on where to start,
mhm.
and I think it's just going to come down to getting that first one. Whatever the first one ends up being, I don't know yet because there's stuff that's on pre-order, but I might pull the trigger on some in stock stuff here in the next few weeks. I don't know yet. We'll see. I have other stuff that's coming in. I don't know. I always do this thing before a paycheck hits where I start to I get a shopping cart full for my groceries. I get a shopping cart full over at Big Bed and kind of start to plan my finances a little bit. And then invariably, I swear to Godzilla they plan this. I'll start getting emails. Pre-order processing soon. Pre-order processing soon. Pre-order processing. I'm like, ah. And at least with places like Big Bed, when that happens, you still have the opportunity to cancel something if you're like, I'm not going to follow through with this. So it's a good thing to have. Um, this is a great question, actually, and I'm curious too. Jim Salzberg asks for you, what's your favorite Devastator color? G1 green, G2 yellow, or G2 orange or Diaclone multicolor?
Okay. So this is actually a great question, James, because as a kid, I owned the green version,
Me
and
too.
then when Generation Two came along, I owned the yellow version. So I've had both of them. It will always be green because that's Old Faithful. To me, that's the first combiner. Having said that, you saw that I'm kind of getting into Diaclone a little bit, not as much as some of the hardcore folks. The day I land the Diaclone Multicolor Devastator, it will probably end up being my favorite just because of what it is, what it represents, and how I think he was whatever Devastator's character was called in Diaclone. I think he was a good guy. Actually, then he became a bad guy for the purpose of the Decepticons.
That's
So
what I seem to remember as well.
yeah,
I haven't gotten through the whole series again yet. I've had it
yeah.
digitally forever. I bought the series again on DVD recently. I just haven't sat down to do it.
And when it comes
But
to
I remember.
Diaclone, oh sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you're
Oh,
fine.
when it comes to Diaclone, like one of the things that when people buy a Holy Grail, a lot of times you see those elitists online in every community where they just go, "Oh, look at me! I threw all this money there." When I got the Diaclone Optimus, to me, I think I said it earlier, it represents the genesis of what made Transformers possible. And for that reason, it's special to me. But also, I missed the chance to get one because I was 21 years old, I was a student, and I had the chance to get one for less money. And I couldn't. I was a student, I was in third year university. It wasn't going to happen. It was 18 and a half years later before I found another one that was obtainable from a seller I trusted, and that culminates the story of it. And like holy grails, even in the toy lines you like the most, there can be a great story behind it that's more than just look at me, I have an expensive toy. Didn't matter what the value of
Well,
the Diaclone Optimus Battle Convoy was for me. So
speaking of great stories, um, Jim Salzberg apparently has a Diaclone multicolored Devastator, and if he finds it in his storage, he's going to reach out to you. So,
ooh,
uh,
okay. Okay. Let me know. Let me know. I am trying to be a little better about my spending. Like I just canceled the his tank, but my credit card just got hit for Operation Recall. So if I don't respond to you, James, it'll just be because I'm licking my wounds from the multiple Kickstarters lately. But I
I
will, if you do reach
I
out to me
will
on Instagram or Facebook, I will find a way to respond.
I will say in advance, respond to him because he is the least gougy reseller I've ever come across. Period.
He's always in the comments. So hey, any friend of the Toy Grinds Grindhead Jim is a friend of mine. So okay.
He's amazing. He says it'll be a while, so there you go. But just to close out here, Masters Maniac Mexico says that you were a fantastic guest. I agree. It was a very interesting panel, and he thinks that you and I interact very well with each other. And
Thank you, Masters Maniac. I appreciate that. I got a few more minutes before I got to pick my wife up from work, so it's not. I'm not in a terrible rush, just so you know. So we can go a little past the 75 minutes, if need be.
Perfect. And anonymous dude 123 says, want to say thanks, content's pleasure to watch. Good vibes. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
Jordan.
You give us the good vibes back. Absolutely. Um, Gojatron with the question of the hour. Asks if you prefer G1 Megatron as a gun or a tank.
Gun, and not because it's the obvious answer from G1. It's because I always say that something's more precious when it's taken away from you. Like I always tell people that Optimus became more precious in our memories when he died in the movie. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched the 86 movie. Yeah.
Right.
By the way, Darth Vader is also Luke Skywalker's dad in another movie. If we're on spoiler, yes. Sorry, rude, how rude of me. So when the idea of Megatron as a gun got taken away from us, it became more precious to us. I love the Generation 2 tank because it was different, it was big, it was green, and it scaled with my Power Master Optimus Prime from a few years earlier. So I like the tank. But the fact that I can't get him as a gun anymore, like even if you try to get him in the Earthrise or Kingdom, or not Kingdom Siege, Jim, you will end up with a tank. But that's fine because his robot mode looks close enough to his G1 appearance that it won't be a problem. So
And
yeah.
I'm gonna and even though he didn't ask, it's my show, so I'm gonna answer anyway. I have a great nostalgia and a lot of like love for the gun mode
Mm-hmm.
because of the cartoon, because of the past and everything. But I never, like, I never liked the G1 Megatron at all in the toy
Mm-hmm.
form because I'm like, it doesn't look like the cartoon. It's cheesy. I don't like it. I appreciate it for what it represents,
Yeah.
and that's great. But for me, I like a better looking figure, and I can say without any hesitation that every version of Megatron I've seen as a tank is invariably a better toy. So for me, I have no problem at all with him being a tank whatsoever. But I'll always have a little glimmer in my eye for when he turns into a gun and inexplicably shrinks on the cartoon. So it's a
Mass
whole thing.
shifting. It's like Prime's trailer disappearing,
Hmm.
right? Or Soundwave,
Right,
right?
right. That's
Mass
you can
shifting,
I right
compartmentalized
right.
space.
Right. It's physics. Look it up. The compression of molecules. Ben Sully says, "Great stream on a big subject. Try to keep quiet 'cause I only remember my lost G1 G2s, but you're tempting me to find some new bits and pieces. Awesome. That's
Mhm.
what we love to do. Y'all make us spend our money. We're gonna make you spend your money. That's just how it
Yeah. I have been thinking about a new live series called AKA, because you know how my other one's TKO, Toy Connections Online, AKA
goes."
Ask Ken Anything. So if people have a question that they want answered, we could do it on a live stream. I was thinking about it, but I'm still wrestling in my head. Someone's going to ask a really basic question, like, what do you think of Kenner Power Cyborg? And I'll be like, which figure is that?
Kenner Superpower Cyborg is from Series 3 of Superpowers. It's one of the last ones they released, and it was a big faux pas because they should have been in Series 2. As a result, he's super rare, way
Yeah.
too expensive, but a beautiful figure and a must have if you're into the line. Brick something with a question says, "Forgive my ignorance, but was that the same for Shockwave? Did they ever make a non-gun version?" To my knowledge, they did, but I couldn't tell you what his mode is in those other versions.
Well, in Siege, he has that like spaceshipy type of thing. I'm not sure whether he had the same issue because he wasn't released as often. And when they do make him a gun, he is a space age type of gun, so he looks more like a cannon anyway. And it's funny, on my phone, you know that picture I just showed you for all the scraps that I picked up. I sent the picture to the guy who I bought like 3/4 of that from, and he responded, "Oh, all that's from me." So my buddy recognized the photo right away. He goes, "Almost all that's from me." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm telling everyone online right now about how I buy your scraps, buddy." So right, and we all love your
uh,
scraps. So anyway, sorry, go
that's
ahead.
right. Bjorn has a question about Army Builders in the Transformers line. Sharkticons are the immediate thing that jump out. You've also
Yeah,
got the Croc ones. What are those called?
Alicons.
Alicons. Oh, of course, they're Alicons. Those are the two that jump to mind. You could argue that on a small scale, Quintessons would be a troop builder because you want to have like five optimally for the movie set. Junkicons would be another
Chunk,
one for troop building.
Chunkyons.
Yeah, Junkions.
Scourge and the sweeps for a small amount.
Yep, yep.
I
And you
like
want to have
to
like three.
I like to go Scourge as the target master, with target master, and the regular Scourges or the sweeps. And I like to go with same thing with Cyclonus because he has his armada, but it's just one other ship that makes appearance. It
Right.
only appears every now and then. So that's more of a pair more than an army builder. Reflector. I think they're called photons or photrons. He shows up as a generic trooper. So I like to use the multicolored reflector based on the toy, and then the other ones are the army builders. I like to do that. So
Yeah.
there are a few army builders, but not to the extent like you wouldn't think of them the same way you think of GI Joe army builders or Star Wars army builders, because the Sharkticons and Alicons, who are the main army builders, are minions of the Quintessons. So the Autobots and Decepticons don't have their own mass generic troopers, right?
Gotatron saying Insecticons. Giraffe saying
Sort
Dinobots.
of, yeah.
And yeah. So I was going to make this point that even with G1, you had different scale in there. So you have like the mini bots and all that stuff with the different vehicles. That could be considered in a way troop building because you had some mold reuse with repaints, and you had just smaller variations of larger robots and stuff like that. So although you're not buying one thing that's the same and getting a bunch of them, you're getting a little fleet of this size, and then you're getting the G1s and the G2s, and you're getting them in this sizes here, and so that I would almost argue that Transformers in general are troop builders, just because you're going for a wide array of things. I don't often see people that only have like six Transformers. They either have none or like scores of them.
And
Um,
those that have none will still grab an Optimus and a Megatron, right?
that's right.
So
Exactly. And then it's a question of how long does that actually last? And Jason Garcia with a good tip. He says Energon cubes, army build modes. That's a good idea. Um, and I think they have made. I've seen some like third party like
they
creators like
have,
make Energon cubes. Yeah,
yeah.
I am. That's definitely something I want to get. But with all of that said, this has been an absolute blast. It was a pleasure to finally have you on the show. It's been a long time coming. We've been talking about it for seems like forever. Um, but I found this informative and enjoyable, and you're welcome anytime, man. Thank you so much for your time, Ken.
We'll definitely find some more time. The time just blew by so fast. You've got a great community in the chat. I enjoy the way you host. I enjoy when I can get to it, depending on my work schedule. I like listening to toy grinds on the way home on a drive when I can get to it. Um, and yeah, thanks you so much for having me on. It's a
Of
blast.
course. And speaking of finding things in community, Toy Connections is just doing amazing things over his YouTube channel, which you can find the links for in the description below, as well as all of his socials. Go there, follow him, hit your notification bells if you're on Instagram or if you're on YouTube, because Instagram does have notification bells now, and you should use them so you don't miss out on stuff. We are not going to be turned into TikTok. Fuck the algorithm. We're going to just keep going. We're going to, if you cannot get those notifications to work, make it a point every other day or a couple times a week to go to your favorite channels and see what they've been up to. Because if the algorithm's not going to help you, we've got to help ourselves. We hunt toys, and now we have to hunt toy content. So that's just the way it has to be. With all that said, it's been my pleasure to host the show tonight. We will see you on Thursday with a video premiere for a Marvel Selects Roundup. And in the
Ooh,
meantime, take care of yourselves, and we'll also see you for another charity auction on Saturday. Big pack week over here at the Grind HQ. So have a great one. We appreciate you. We're out of here. Good night.